Hello, my name's Andrew Blick. I'm redoing Politics and Contemporary History at King's College London, and this lecture is about how democratic is the United Kingdom in practice. To start this subject, it's useful to introduce the concept of democracy itself. It's a term we hear a lot. Most people you'll speak to, most politicians publicly will say they support democracy, they agree with democracy, they agree with having democracy in the UK, they agree with having democracy around the world, and many other countries around the world would say, their leaders would say they are democratic, they respect democracy, so on and so forth, even in countries that some people might say aren't actually particularly democratic. So it's a universally accepted term, but what it means in practice, what it actually means, isn't quite as clear, and how democratic the UK and other countries around the world which would say they're democratic really are, is also open to discussion. So to have that discussion and apply it in particular to the UK, it's useful to start by asking what democracy is. The term itself comes from ancient Greece. Often ancient Greece and Athens within ancient Greece is said to be the place where democracy began. Actually, that claim has now been disputed a bit more, and it's said that you can find examples of democracy elsewhere in the world, even earlier. Nevertheless, the term comes from there, and it means, broadly speaking, rule of the people. So the concept there is that it's the people in some way, everybody who's in charge. Now, actually, in Athens, the people was quite a narrowly defined term, and certainly didn't include, for instance, women or slaves, so it's quite a small group who were defined as the people. But the concept that somehow it's a group, a wider body of the population, rather than a very small single autocrat or very small group governing, that's the principle that comes through with this term democracy. And in contemporary terms, I think it's useful to think about democracy with two concepts in mind. The first one is popular control, that the power of government, the authority of government, the way in which decisions are made on behalf of all of us, in some way rests in the people. It's been authorised by the people, it's subject in some way to consent by the people. That's one part of the concept. The other part of the concept of democracy, I think it's useful to think about, is the idea of equality, that in some sense everybody's got an equal set of political rights, an equal ability to participate in the political community, to participate in that democracy. Without those two things together, popular control and political equality, you haven't really got democracy as we understand it, because it's not simply enough for a majority to be able to run everything and perhaps to actually take away rights from a minority. There has to be a set of protections for the rights of everybody, even those who are in a minority and maybe in some way are not popular with the majority of the community. So it's those two concepts together make up democracy. And when we're thinking about how democratic the UK is in practice, it's useful to think about those two concepts. Now, how they're actually realised in practice is another matter, and that's what we're going to get into later on in this lecture. But those are the two concepts to bear in mind. When we're discussing in this lecture how democratic the UK is, that means we're measuring. We're not saying that a country, the UK or anywhere else, either is or is not democratic. It's not a binary yes-no answer. It's a question of degree and of different ways of looking at it. And that's what we'll get into in this lecture, is that actually you're measuring, you're saying, well, it's performing quite well in this aspect, maybe less well in another aspect. And these are all the different factors that we'll be considering during the course of this lecture.